Today is going to be about powerful communication, and I thought that this webinar specifically because here in the UK this was the first week back for swimming lessons after yet another lockdown. So people are probably in the full swing, or they're now getting back to going back in the water within the next month or so. Or if you are from around the world, you may have been back in for a while now. And this is just something as well, just to, I always believe that learning constantly is always a good thing. So coming onto these webinars is a bonus, I believe. So today we'll be looking at how building a trusted relationship means that the pace of the learning will be effective. And I'm Helen Hughes, and I am the co-founder of Mini Water Adventurers. So what will I be covering today? So these are the 4 A's, and the first sort of section we'll be looking through is making sure we are acknowledging feelings. I do briefly mention about parents, colleagues, and of course the children, and so we're going to be looking through that. Then we're going to be accepting, or by the end of this webinar is our accepting more of what the children's brainwave cycles are, and I'll be going into that. If you have not heard or researched or anything about brainwave cycles, very important, so I'm going to go through that. And then allowing a free flow. So the swimming world, unfortunately, I believe, or we believe in Mini Water Adventurers, that the swimming world is becoming very strict and sort of very rigid in a very structure such that you stick by. So what we believe in is accepting these acknowledgements of feelings, brainwaves, to allow that free flow to happen throughout your swimming sessions. And therefore, we need to make sure that we are adopting a different mindset to allow all of this to happen. Okay, so that's what I'll be going throughout today. But just quickly, some of you have not met me before, and if you have, then of course you know this information already, but I'm just going to go through it very quickly and briefly for those that don't. I am a swimming teacher, and I have been a swimming teacher for 27 years. This year would have been my 28th year, and I have also owned swim schools here in the UK, and previously, my previous life in Florida in the US of A. And so that equates 17 years. Just a little bit about my background is that I do have a Bachelor of Science of, my degree is in sports science back in the day. And I also have a teaching degree as well. I've been in the education sector since 2001, where I was a sports science lecturer and a PE teacher. I've owned, like I said, 2 swim schools. My first one was Helen's Fishes Club, and in more recent years is then Mini Water Adventurers. We are, and I am, the proud designer of the Orca Swim Trainer. So if you haven't heard of the Orca Swim Trainer, I did recently do a couple of weeks ago a webinar on training aids and why it's important to use training aids. So that is on recording. If you wish to have that, then please let us know. We can send that to you. And I'm also designed what we call epic bath boxes. Mini Water Adventurers is all about alternative and progressive ways of teaching, and of course in the aquatic world, because that's where we are placed, and we are always researching and finding and coming up with really great ways for children and adults to really embrace their time and enjoy their journey of learning to swim. So that's what we are all about. We are now an online resource for parents and teachers. So are you searching or seeking ways to effectively communicate with parents? So you may have parents that sit on the side, maybe because the children are a little bit older, they're sitting on their side. They may be voicing their opinions from the side. They may be shouting or trying to encourage their child from poolside. Or you might have the extreme. They might just be on their phone and texting. They have no sort of connection in that sense of where they just think they're off on their swimming lessons, so they are sitting back and having their time, which unfortunately a lot of the time they miss those all important moments when they are facing down as opposed to looking up. Also, you have parents that have very high expectations. So especially in this particular time that we're in here, of course, in the UK with the children going back, the parents seem to think that they will then continue to where they left off about a year ago, which, as we know, is not the case. So therefore, their expectations are even more than probably what they were before. So therefore, us as teachers maybe feel a little bit more sort of our expectations then change as well, don't they? For the younger ones, you might find the parents are quite nervous themselves, and especially coming back again, their feelings and thoughts are very, not quite sure about what's going to be happening. Of course, the systems have changed, how we are social distancing and wearing masks and all that sort of thing. It could be all this new world that we're coming back into is quite overwhelming. And then the parent seems to be in their own little world. So they come to swimming lessons and sometimes you almost have to say, woohoo, hi, I'm here. Come on, let's get going. So parents are really tricky. So having that effective communication and the understanding, as I'll move on to in a little bit, is really important, because then you can chat to the parents in a respectful way as to what's going on, basically. Okay, so that's parents. Then we of course have our colleagues, so who we're working with. So why do we need effective communication? So basically you're the teachers that you're working with or have working for you. We have different teaching styles, they have different personalities, they work differently, everybody works differently. Some teachers will come and turn up really early because they're getting themselves prepared, ready to go for the swimming lessons. Or you've got those that just drive up and they're ready to go right moments before their lessons. You've also got the teachers that are organised, highly organised, they've got all their lessons planned out. Or you've got those that just sort of feel as though they're just rolling and going through the motion. So that's the colleagues and why it's important to have that effective communication with those. And then of course we have our customers, our swimmers, our children, and maybe of course you teach adults as well, but you're going to have different swimmers. You're going to have the ones that are extremely confident. You have the ones that are raring to go, or you have the ones that are really nervous and they stand back and are the observers first. You may have the swimmers that are really playful, they just love jumping in and they're ready to go. Or you've got those that need that time, that have some of them may come across as if they don't have much of a personality because they just have the same monotone. And of course the same as swimming teachers, they have their different personalities. Some are just highly imaginative, whereas those need a little bit of a boost. You've got those that have different interests. Some might be into superheroes, some might be into animals, some might be into they prefer to really be on the football field. They might be just in swimming lessons because it's something that they feel important, or the parents feel, of course, important to be there. So that's why, again, all of this is important to know how to communicate with them. So what does POWER actually stand for? So there is pause, observe, wait, encourage, and then reaction and response. And I'll be going through that in a little bit later and go through each one as to what I mean, but just to give you the what the POWER actually stands for, and that's what that is. So a brief, I'm going to go into the swimmers and the children first. I feel that once the underlying understanding with regards to our customers, which are our children, if we truly understand these guys, then to communicate effectively is going to be our pinnacle point of understanding. So in definition, so looking at the dictionary, to communicate means if you communicate with someone, you are sharing or exchanging information with them. So of course, throughout our swimming lessons, however long you do it, you are in constant flow of communicating, whether it's verbal or non-verbal. You are exchanging that information from what you have and helping them in the swimming world, so throughout your swimming lessons. So why is it effective? Why do we use these effective ways of communication? So I briefly mentioned earlier about it is highly important that we understand the fundamental and pinnacle points of a child's development. Without that, I don't believe that your swimming lessons can be as effective as they could be. We need to make sure that we are, I'll go through the what I mean by child development in a minute, because there's different areas that we need to look into. But why and how we need to look into child development is basically the children, your customers, will need to understand why they're there, what are they doing, and they need to be clear on that. And they also need to be felt understood. So if you understand the way that a child develops, their brain development and so forth, which I'll go into a little bit, then they will feel as though they're being understood, as well as understanding why and what they're doing. Communication is the foundation of relationships and essential to learning, playing, and social interaction. So how you communicate to a child is how they are then going to learn their skills as well. So it's that foundation level that we're really boosting and really getting grounded to make sure that later on that it all comes together. So the different areas of the child development, which is really important, is of course their biological and physical side of things. So a child is physiologically only able to do what they can do at that particular age and stage. So we need to be understanding of that to be able to then communicate to what they are then able to be able to achieve. If we don't understand how and when a child can move in their different ways, then how are we able then to communicate and essentially give them that learning platform to move through their journey of swimming? Now, we do offer an online course. I was doing this time last year, we were doing a workshop of this. We have since then developed and moved forward with this. An online course will be coming, it's modular, I'll explain a little bit at the end. But I do go into these in a lot more detail, and there's quite a lot of in the modules, there are chapters, and in our biological and physical, it's actually the memory and movement that we will that we look into, and that's when the Orca swim trainer comes into this, and very important to understand how a child learns in the sense of when they are moving in the water. The next thing is their psychological and cognitive development. And again, I go into that in more detail in the course because understanding the way that they're understanding things, how they're learning, their learning styles and things like that. So I tap into that, looking into Piaget's cognitive theory. We look at the sensory side of things as well, so tapping into all of their 8 senses, and the playfulness of looking at schematic play. So that's looking at the psychological and cognitive side of things. And then what I'm going to touch on today is the social and emotional side of things. So their development, so their emotional intelligence is developing, and I'll explain a little bit, and we need to help that within the swimming world to ensure that they are getting the best out of their swim journey. Social side of things is, of course, if they are, you know, in a group setting, to be able to understand and be respectful of themselves and others. So their emotional side of things is really, we really need to be focusing on their emotional security, especially at this time. Their emotions are probably all over the place. You know, they're not quite sure what's going on, especially with the babies. You know, and I'll go on to the different ways of communicating, you know, facial expressions and things like that. It's very hard now, especially with masks on and things, and being at a distance, it's really tricky. So again, this is why the effectiveness of how we do this is going to make a huge impact. So making those attachments with key people, meaning us and their parents, we help create a safe base which leads to children feeling free to be themselves and that they can play and explore. So if you don't have that key person that's creating that safe place for them, a child will then, which I'll go into in a little bit, they will go into a state of mind of where they will not be open to carry on. You might find that as soon as a child comes onto poolside and they don't feel in that secure place with that person or in themselves, then the rest of the time, unfortunately, is going to be really hard to help them overcome those feelings, and that emotional intelligence plays into that role. So that's where the play and exploration comes into it, which is something, of course, I touch into the course, and which we are huge advocates of play-based. We are a purposeful, playful and play-based swim school, and that's highly important that a child is able to do that. A child needs to feel secure and respected and experience this harmonious and balanced environment. So within the environment you're providing, so during their swimming lessons, you're providing that that safe space of where they can play and you know, be joyful and happy, and that then in turn makes sure that they are feeling secure. Trust comes from this. So if a child doesn't trust either the environment or themselves or you, then unfortunately it's going to be really tricky. So when that trust is formed with that child and the parent as well, then everything else then tends to has a rolling on effect. If you don't have that trust and it takes a long time, then it will take, you know, it can take, you can take 2 steps backwards to come forward, and it's a really bumpy road. So if you push a child too soon, too quickly, then that trust then breaks, unfortunately, and then you then have to regain that trust again. So, and I'll go through in a little bit about these brainwaves as to understanding where a child is at in order to make sure that that trust can be earned. So the communication is based on this trust formation. So as I just briefly mentioned, when an individual is emotionally stressed or anxious, fearful or angry, they move into a high-level beta state, and I'll explain what a beta state is in a moment. This is really not a time for them to learn. It's not a time for them to be open to trust, and it's not their time for them to be able to communicate from you. So basically they shut down. They either keep themselves, they go quiet, or they will probably not even get into the water. You don't want a highly stressed child coming into the water straight away. You don't want to force them into that situation. And I'll explain in a little bit as to why that is an absolute no-no. Basically, in a child's mind, there is a gap in the way that things appear to the way that they really are. So basically, they are thinking all these different things in their little mind, apart from what they're there to do and what they're there to have. They're there really essentially to learn to swim in a fun way. But unfortunately, if they're in that level of state of mind, they're not going to see that of what you're trying to achieve. So effectively, it's not going to work. So the brainwave cycles, so there are 4 of them, and it is a cellular biologist, Bruce Lipton, that's really interesting to look up. And he looks into epigenetics with regards to the way that the brain functions, and at certain brain wave levels as to where a child and an adult sits. You'll probably find that on certain type of music, that you'll find that they're either at an alpha state or a beta state, and that's what it means by the brainwave cycles. So it does happen in there's singing bowls and things like that that actually are relative to these brainwave cycles. But we actually sit in these brainwave cycles, which is really interesting. So these 4 brainwave cycles are delta, theta, alpha, and beta. So in delta, this is basically the beginning from birth up until about 2 years old. Now, it's not going to be right at 2 years old and then you move on to the next one. It's around about, so they will interconnect at some point, but it's around about 2 years old. And of course, it's not going towards 3 years old, but it's around about just short of the 2 years. And basically with delta, this means that a child is in their subconscious mind. So this is where they primarily function from. So they are essentially awake but asleep, or they're asleep with their eyes open, basically. So the equation for us is that when we are in a deep sleep, that is the equivalent to a delta brainwave. So you can imagine when we're in a deep sleep, that's how a child between birth and 2 years old are in that world. Theta is the ages 2 to 6. And they are really connected to their internal world. They live in this huge imagination. The world is all about imagination. They absolutely have no signs of critical rationale. They basically will accept anything that you tell them. So if your next swimming lesson, that you're off to fly to the moon and we're going to be going now, they really feel that they're really going to be going to the moon. So it's really this. Again, this is why having this play-based style swimming lessons, it really works essentially really well, because it's that imaginative, playfulness of how they learn. So then moving on to alpha, ages 5 to 8 years, they are now forming this analytical mind. They are drawing conclusions from their environment. They are still imaginative, so it'd be nice for them to have creative lessons too. So don't stop at this point, even though their critical minds are starting to kick in. They basically have both feet in both worlds. So they're understanding more of what it's all about, basically. However, they still like that playfulness as well. So it's still so when you're talking about the skill sets in swimming, they're understanding now as to why you're asking them to do it. However, they still like to do it in a playful way, as opposed to it just being very strict and quite boring. And then the beta. So this is basically from 8 to 12 years old, or really from 8 and up. We as adults are mainly in beta. and they are very conscious now about the world. They are highly analytical. They're now kicking into their analytical world. Their mind is awake now. They're really focused and they're alert, which is why schools now they can sit down better and things like that in the school and educational world. So obviously in the swimming and the aquatic world, this is when you can really start getting into the nitty-gritty of why their legs need to be moving in this way and their arms need to be focused in that way. And I really truly believe that this is the time of where, if they are really interested in swimming and they want to really develop their swimming skills, then they move up and they go then to a swim club, and that's when they can then talk to them in the more structured way of how things really need to be placed in order to be better in the water. So that's the brainwave cycles. So it really gives you that understanding as to why the way you say and do things needs to be really thought about, because each brainwave and age group goes into different realms of their thinking. So ages between 0 and 7 is our programming years. So we are subconsciously throughout, that's why our first 7 years is so important, because and I'll go into a minute, these are our programming years, and they will spend most of their time in the theta and alpha brainwave cycles. So that's when they are, really open to suggestion. They're in their super learning state. They are in this permanent state of hypnosis, and they are programmed by their environment. So how you develop your swimming lessons is really going to make a huge impact for later on in life. So that's why us as Mini Water Adventurers, our Purposeful Play Learn to Swim program is purposely developed because of these 0 to 7 years. So our program goes up to 7 years old. We have 7 levels, and it really hones in onto why those 7 levels need to be sensory. So we're swim, water, interaction and movement, and it's really important for this, because what you do and what you say and how you react is what they are going to be taking on subconsciously. So for those first 7 years, 95% of, and this is life in general, not just in the swimming world, but 95% of our life will be programmed by the time that we are 7. So this is why it's massively important how you structure your swimming lessons, how your swim school programs are set, needs to be really, really looked into. And that's why child development, which is what we're going through now, needs to be really as effective as it can, because it really then sets and plays this puzzle piece ready for their life later on. So the rest of that 5% then is then the subconscious. So now what we learned in our first 7 years, so for me in my 40s, what I did in those first 7 years of my life, I am now subconsciously, I will now consciously think, oh, I remember doing that when I was 7 years old, and that's how I felt. And it's then filtered through to how we then deal with things as an adult now. And it's only 5% conscious behavior. So if something happens between 0 and 7 years, we need therapy. We need to be able to change our mindset consciously in order to change it to a positive reaction. And I go into this in a lot more detail in the online course, and it just completely blows your mind, because it's unbelievable what and how powerful those first 7 years really are. So a child is recording their behavior by observing and downloading. So the nine ways that you may already be using or Adding to your program, it's make sure that the programming time is a nice journey for them. So I'm not going to go into these into massive detail because I don't have the time to do that. Again, more information of that it's in the online course. But sounds, basically, are you playing music when they come poolside? Are the pool, is the pool huge so that you've got the acoustics are just you know, just maybe too loud for some children. Now at the moment, your body language is huge because of course you're at a distance, you may be teaching poolside. How expressive are you? I'm hugely expressive with everything that I do. Then how are you with that? Do you just stand there with your arms down by the side of you? Echolalia, and I can never say this, but echolalia is the repetitiveness of words. So that's why we go kick, 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 and then you do it again, kick, kick, kick. So just the repetitiveness of things. Your facial expressions say everything. Let's just say I could never play poker because everything is shown in my face. Stories. How are you communicating a skill set that maybe a child is struggling a little bit? How can you tap into their imagination, going back to the brainwave cycles, and bring that lesson alive? Sign language, some people may be doing my action songs throughout my swimming lessons incorporated sign language, which is really great. And then how often are you singing and playing music throughout your swimming lessons? And then do you use visuals? So do you have a little man or a doll, or do you have cards poolside with the instructions on? And how do you help those that are needing more visuals, especially because you can't touch them? How do you feel that you can get around that? And I do go into more information about those at a different time. Positive language is huge. So you need to make sure the language that you use is clear and they know what they're doing, because like we said previously, you need to make sure that a child understands why you're asking them to do what they're doing. So having that clear guidance is essential. So how can we say things that we're trying to in a positive way rather than it being negative all the time? Because of course, again, we know these words matter. So can we use words like walking feet instead of stop running, or instead of stop crying, it's okay to cry. And then how about, well, what's your plan? Rather than saying, no, don't do that. Or you can do tricky things, rather than saying, well, it's really not that hard, is it? Another thing, maybe I can show you another way, rather than saying, I explained this last time, why don't you remember? So trying to do positive words instead of saying things that might affect them for later on. Also, other things, and again, I go into this in more detail, your words really matter. So as they're going through their swimming lessons, you can add in certain things like, I believe in you. You can do this. That's really brave, what you did just then. It is okay to be scared. We can try it your way. And I understand you. I hear you. So again, the children, like I said right at the beginning, they're understanding what they need to be doing, and then they are felt as if they're being understood. Changing mindset. So we look at Mini Water Adventurers, we have this holistic process. So we actually address the whole child. So when a swim school says that they are child-led or child-centered, it truly means that the child is leading the session. You can't say I'm a child-led swim program if you then as a teacher is telling them what to do, because essentially that's not child-led. you are then teacher-led. So our Learn to Swim program really helps change a teacher's mindset to allow that child make those decisions for them, of course, in a safe way. But I also will be going to another webinar about play and how risk and taking risks is really important for their Learn to Swim journey. So I'll talk about that more as well. Their rhythm and repetition. So making sure that I use a bones of it swimming lesson. So you actually understand as a teacher, you have all these skill sets that, yes, you would like to, obviously, a child to learn as they're going through their journey. And it's making sure that their rhythm and repetition is such that it's effective. So using the different themes and things like that helps with that rhythm and repetition to ensure that communication is relative to the child's needs. You are providing education, you are not instructing them. So when they go as they're older and they are wanting to know more about their skill sets, then that's when instructing comes into it. You are then coaching them, then you are telling them what's the best thing to do. You are then the teacher and you are teacher leading them. So you are educating, you're providing them this safe and fun environment rather than telling them what to do. And then please be aware of the present moment. A child only lives in the present moment. They literally have forgotten 5 minutes ago what they were doing. So you can't then expect them, and especially this is where you talk to the parents about it, is that what they did last week in swimming lesson or even yesterday in swimming's lesson might not necessarily be of what they're doing in today's lesson. And that again of changing that whole mindset is that the child, and that's why it's child-led, is because they are basically, they have no rationality about things. They just want to do everything that you are providing them with, which is why these themes and why we provide these themes in our program is because then a child can really thrive in that present moment that you've given them or they're in. So quickly going over the parents. So what we said about the beginning of them being poolside and shouting orders at the children or expectations of being so high. Just remember this, is that you are the expert, you have your qualifications, you are on continuous educational courses, and you have more experience than them. So that's why your communication of understanding all what I've spoken about today, you can then in a respectful and calm manner explain to them why you are wanting to do what you're wanting to do. So when a parent is expecting their child to swim right away, or they're not putting their faces down and just tell them to dunk them, no, you can then explain the reason why you are going to be taking your time with them. So again, just bear that in mind, is that you are the expert, you have more experience than them. And then with your colleagues, you are a team, you work together, you keep talking to each other about different scenarios happening in the water, or how did you deal with that? Well, I dealt with it in this way, maybe it will work for you, you can try this. So keeping in touch with each other is really important. And then reading from the same song sheet. So you will be a member of a swim school, or your swim school that you have developed. You will have your own missions and you'll have your own purpose. So your team needs to be on that same page as you, because if they have a different opinion about different things, then it's not going to work. Yes, you have your different personalities, and yes, you have your different ways of working, but you all need to be reading from the same or singing from the same song sheet. And then you need to have trust and respect. So if you don't have the respect for your colleagues, then unfortunately that communication will it will be tricky. So just summarizing, going back from the beginning, we need to ensure that we are really understanding the feelings of the children, the parents, and your colleagues. We need to be aware that those first 7 years are extremely important of the programming. So what we say, what our words and our actions, and how and what we use throughout our swimming lessons make a massive impact in a child's journey of learning to swim. And then just to tell you and to say to you and give you that confidence that you are the expert and you have the expertise, and constantly keep learning and finding different things and coming on different courses like this, webinars and things to keep learning. So pause. So powerful communication, so power. You're pausing, you're taking it all in, you're in that that moment. So take and you have that distance now, so you can take a step back and just watch what and how things are progressing. You're observing to see what's going on in the lesson, who needs the help, when and where, and do they? Maybe they'll figure out themselves. You're going to wait until you do that, because they may figure it out themselves, or they're using that exploration and that investigative side of things and that playful side of things to try and figure it out themselves, which is why we need to change our mindset to enable that to happen. We need to be providing them with the correct training aids and things like that to enable that also to happen, which is why the ORCA is huge. Then we need to, of course, encourage them by using those different ways of communicating. And then the reaction, the response is going to happen, and it's going to be positive. It's going to be smiles and joyfulness and things like that, because of the way that you are changing your mindset such that you are enabling this powerful communication. So that's what POWER stands for. So we have 45-minute lessons. We don't do 20, 30 minutes. And this really enables this to happen. A child doesn't just go through one skill set to the next after the other, because like I said, they're in their moment of time. So enabling them to pause, for you to pause and observe, is giving them that time and space to actually embrace their time in the water. So just to give you a little bit more information about what we offer, we will have the it's coming, our Swim Zone Fundamentals online course. Like I said, I did a workshop last year, but this course is in a lot more detail. It is modular, and we go into everything into a lot more detail, providing science. It's all going to be science-based and based on expertise of my 27 years, as well as my Catherine's expertise on her. She's an NLP practitioner. She's a mindfulness coach and things like that. So both of our experiences coming together and makes that online course phenomenal. We also offer these EPIC session plan ideas. So if you're not familiar with those, please look into those. EPIC stands for Explore, Play, Investigate and Create. So the theme lessons make sure enables the child to have that playfulness about their lessons. And then, like I've said about our webinar, is the ORCA Swim Trainer, which we are so excited. Last year it couldn't happen, unfortunately, but this year it is. They'll be here in May, and I'm ready to shout off the top of the roof about these, because this is a complete game changer for your swimming lessons, and it's I go into more detail about why that is just a complete game changer for the memory and movement, enabling the child to move. So of course they can increase their physiological side of things, increasing their strength as well as their confidence. So that's the more information about what we offer. You can get all of that information on miniwateradventurers.com. And I hope you've enjoyed this webinar. I feel as though I've talked quite quickly at the end, so I do apologise. But I always like to finish off with either a quote or something that I find it really hits me. So this quote for you to leave with today is: to effectively communicate, we must realize that we are all different in the way we perceive the world, and use this understanding as a guide to our communication with others. So that's an amazing Tony Robbins. So that in a nutshell is powerful communication. What we see in the world is not necessarily what someone else is, and we just need to be respectful of that and then enable them to thrive and be who they are when they want to be. So thank you so much for attending, and I'm going to stop sharing.